Remember that deep dive we did on BIM in Australia? Fascinating stuff, really. But today, we're going even deeper. We're zeroing in on a crucial part of it, levels of development, or LODs as they're commonly called.
And they're important.
Now, I know what you might be thinking out there. LOD? Sounds kind of technical, maybe a tad dry. But trust me on this. This is where the strategic thinking behind building projects really comes to life.
It really is. See, LODs are often mistaken for just another set of technical terms in the world of BIM, but there's so much more than that. It's all about clear communication and strategic planning. Think of it this way. It's the difference between just, sketching an idea on a napkin and having a detailed blueprint ready for construction. Understanding LOD can be a game changer when it comes to, well, saving time, saving money, and avoiding those construction headaches we've all heard about.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole LOD concept a bit. What are LODs all about?
Imagine you're playing a video game, right?
Okay, I'm with you.
So you start at level 1 with basic skills and tools. As you progress through the game, you unlock greater complexity, you get more sophisticated tools, a whole lot more detail. LODs in BIM are similar. They're like stages of development for the building design.
So you're saying there were levels to this?
Exactly. You start with LOD 100, that's like the conceptual stage where you have a very basic representation of the project. It's more about the overall idea than specific details. As you move through LOD 200 and 300, you add more and more detail and precision to the model. Think of it as moving from a rough sketch to a more refined drawing. By the time you reach LOD 400, you've achieved what's known as fabrication-level detail. That means you're dealing with the nitty-gritty. We're talking bolt holes, steel plate thicknesses, the works.
Wow, so by LOD 400, you're basically ready to hand the model to the construction crew. Everything's mapped out down to the smallest detail.
Well, that's a common misconception. While it seems intuitive to think that a higher LOD automatically equals a better model, it's not always the case. In fact, aiming for the highest LOD for every single component can sometimes be counterproductive.
Really? Why is that?
Well, that jump from LOD 300 to 400, while essential for prefabrication and certain complex projects, it isn't always necessary. Imagine using a surgical scalpel to slice bread.
Okay.
Sometimes you just need a good bread knife, and that's enough.
That's a fantastic analogy. So when does that level of detail become a burden rather than a benefit?
Well, that level of detail at LOD 400, it requires a significant investment in terms of time and resources. It means more work for the consultants, more time spent by designers, and often the need for more sophisticated data management tools.
Right.
And if those intricate details, like the exact specifications of every bolt, aren't going to be used for prefabrication or some other specific purpose, then that effort can actually slow down the project and inflate costs.
Exactly. It's all about using the right tool for the job. And that's where those crucial conversations between all the stakeholders are so important. The client, the contractors, the design team, everyone needs to be on the same page from the get-go.
So are you saying that sometimes LOD 300, which focuses on those accurate dimensions and locations of those major elements, can actually be the sweet spot for a project?
Absolutely. For many projects, you're right. LOD 300 provides that ideal balance. You have enough information for coordination, for clash detection, even for quantity takeoffs. It's a solid, reliable foundation, without going overboard on those details that might not be necessary. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But what about projects where you do need that very precise as-built model? What happens after LOD 400?
That brings us to LOD 500.
Okay.
Often overlooked, but incredibly valuable, especially in the world of facility management.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I'll admit, LOD 500 is something I don't know a whole lot about. Tell me more.
Think of an LOD 500 model as a kind of like a digital twin of the finished building. So it's reflecting any changes made during that construction process. It's not just an archive or a record of what's been built. It's a treasure trove of data that can make running that building smoother, more cost-effective over its entire lifespan.
So it's about looking beyond the construction phase and thinking about the long-term operation and maintenance of the building.
Precisely.
This podcast is made for the BIM Australia and New Zealand LinkedIn group. For more discussions, insights, and networking, join our community on LinkedIn, BIM Australia and New Zealand.
Imagine having a digital model that doesn't just show you where the walls and the pipes are, but also tells you, say, the make and model of every piece of equipment, its maintenance history, even where to find the warranty information. That's the power of LOD 500.
It's like having a detailed owner's manual for the entire building, but in a dynamic, interactive, and searchable format. That's incredible.
Exactly. And this level of detailed information can be incredibly valuable for things like planning maintenance, making energy efficiency upgrades, even managing the space within the building.
This is fascinating.
Yes.
I'm starting to see how LOD 500 can be a game changer for those facility managers out there. It's about leveraging the power of all that data to really optimize building performance long after the construction crews are gone.
Absolutely. And what's even more interesting is that in some cases, you can actually bypass LOD 400 altogether and go straight from LOD 300 to 500.
Wait, really? When would you ever want to skip a level like that?
It's more common than you might think, especially for those projects that don't rely heavily on prefabrication. Think about things like office fit-outs, renovations, interior projects. In these scenarios, achieving that very high level of detail for every single component might not be necessary for the construction itself.
So in those cases, a well-developed LOD 300 model would provide enough information for the construction team to get the job done.
Exactly. And once the work is complete, field measurements and verification can be used to bring that model up to that LOD 500 standard. So this way, you're creating an accurate, as-built record without the added time and expense of generating those highly detailed fabrication models.
That's a really strategic approach. You're essentially taking a shortcut,
Yeah.
but in a smart and efficient way, by focusing on the level of detail that's actually needed at each stage of the project.
Precisely. It all comes back to choosing the right LOD for the job and recognizing that sometimes less is more.
This has been incredibly insightful. So for someone new to the world of BIM and LOD, what are the key takeaways they should keep in mind?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that LOD is not a, one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
It's about choosing the right level of detail for the specific needs of each project. Don't get so caught up in this idea that a higher LOD is always better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sometimes a well-executed LOD 300 model is really more than enough, and never underestimate the power of LOD 500. It's not just an archive, it's a valuable tool for facility management, that long-term building operation.
Those are excellent points. And, it really highlights how important that communication and collaboration are throughout the entire process, right?
Yeah.
You've got to have those conversations early on with all the stakeholders to make sure everyone is on the same page about those LOD expectations.
Absolutely. Aligning those expectations right from the get-go, right from the beginning, can really be that key to avoiding those, misunderstandings, delays, and those costly rework issues down the road.
It sounds like choosing the right LOD is all about finding that sweet spot, that balance between having enough information to make those informed decisions, but without getting bogged down in those unnecessary details.
Exactly. It's about working smarter, not harder.
I like that.
And that applies to every stage of the project, from the design, the construction, all the way through to the operation and maintenance.
Thinking back, we talked about BIM in Australia in a previous deep dive, and we've spent time today going deeper into these LOs. But I'm curious, what happens when we start looking at LOs from the perspective of different disciplines,
Oh, that's where things get even more interesting. While those general principles of LOD, they apply across the board, each discipline, whether it's architecture, structure, facade, MEP, they all have their own unique requirements and nuances when it comes to levels of development.
So it's not just about the overall LOD of the project, but about how those LODs are applied and interpreted within each specific discipline. Each group, each team has their own spin on it.
Precisely. Each discipline will have their own set of standards and best practices for developing and documenting their models to meet those specific LOD requirements of the project.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of LO. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the fundamentals of LOD to its impact on everything from design and construction all the way to facility management. Really appreciate the insights.
It's been a pleasure. And LOD, it might seem like this small detail, but as we've discussed today, it plays a huge role in the success of any BIM project.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there who are eager to delve even deeper into this world of LOD, we're going to be back for another deep dive soon. We'll be exploring LODs from the perspective of those different disciplines. the architects, the structural engineers, facade consultants, and more. We really want to give you a comprehensive understanding of how LODs shapes every aspect of a building project.
I'm looking forward to it. It's always exciting to explore these topics in greater detail.
Until then, happy building.